March 20th, 1943. Naval General Staff Building, Kasumigaseki, Tokyo, outside. The city is gray with late winter rain, the kind that turns uniforms dark at the shoulders and leaves puddles shining like oil on the street. Inside the headquarters, the air is warmer but heavier, a mix of damp wool, tobacco smoke, and paper that has been handled too many times. A young lieutenant in a soaked greatcoat stands rigid at a table while senior officers read a dispatch that feels like a fist closing. The numbers are not heroic. They are not about battleships or carrier air groups. They are about cargo, tonnage, days at sea, and ships that never arrived. A staff officer clears his throat and reads again, slower, as if pacing the damage will make it smaller. Another convoy struck south of Kyushu. Another tanker gone. Another freighter blown apart at night. Another list of survivors picked up by patrol craft. Their faces burned by fuel fires. Their eyes empty as the sea. Around the table, men with ribbons for victories in China and early Pacific triumphs do not speak. They stare at columns of figures like doctors looking at a patient whose pulse is fading. For the Imperial Navy, logistics is blood. Ships and aircraft can be built. Crews can be trained. Plans can be drawn. But fuel and rice and steel and rubber, those are the arteries. Cut them, and every front becomes an island in the worst sense of the word. The man at the head of the meeting, an admiral with a tired face and hands, kept deliberately still, taps the paper once. The tap is quiet, but it sets the room on edge. He does not need to raise his voice. He asks a simple question. How many tankers are still afloat that can make the Southern run without escort? No one answers at once. Not because they do not know, but because the answer keeps changing, and it always changes in the same direction. When someone finally speaks, it comes out as a careful estimate, padded with phrases like approximately and believed to be. Everyone understands why. An estimate can be forgiven. A certainty can be punished. Yet the admiral hears the shape of the truth anyway. He turns to the chart on the wall. Shipping routes traced in blue pencil from the oil fields and refineries of the south, up through waters that used to feel controlled, into the home islands. The routes look like rope bridges across a chasm. And now, in red ink, someone has begun marking where the bridges were cut. U.S. submarines, once dismissed as a nuisance, are becoming a knife that works in silence. They do not have to win a fleet battle. They do not have to seize a harbor. They have to do something far more methodical. They have to make Japan hungry. They have to make Japan dry of fuel. They have to make Japan run out of steel, copper, bauxite, and the spare parts that keep an empire moving. In a side room, another officer is already drafting the language that will go up the chain. The wording is polite, formal, and completely unable to hide fear. He writes that losses are increasing, that convoy schedules are slipping, that escort vessels are insufficient, that anti-submarine equipment is inadequate. Each phrase is like a bandage applied to a wound that will not stop bleeding. In the corridor, a telephone rings. It rings again. A clerk hurries to answer, then bows instinctively. Even though the voice is only in the receiver, the clerk's eyes widen as he listens. Another ship has been sunk. Another cargo that will never reach Rabaul. Truk, the Solomons, the Aleutians, the far garrisons whose officers still send confident messages about holding the line. Those garrisons do not know, not yet, that their line is turning into a noose. Back in the meeting room, one of the older admirals finally speaks, not to argue, but to say out loud what the figures imply. He does not claim the enemy is stronger in spirit. He does not blame fate. He simply points to the ledger and admits what the ocean is doing. He tells them that a navy without fuel is a navy without movement, that an empire without shipping is an empire without breath. The words land hard because everyone knows this is the kind of confession that the Imperial Navy has trained itself not to make. They are supposed to talk about decisive battles and glorious sacrifice. They are not supposed to say that merchant ships are the real front line, and that the front line is collapsing. A younger officer, one of the planners, tries to salvage the mood with solutions, increase escorts, route convoys differently, lay more mines, train more sonar operators, fit more depth charge racks, establish air patrols. The Admiral listens to every proposal. He nods. Once, twice. But his eyes keep drifting back to the shipping route map, because he can already picture the future. Every escort assigned to a convoy is an escort not screening the fleet. Every aircraft sent to patrol for submarines is an aircraft not trained for carrier strikes. Every destroyer slowed to protect freighters is a destroyer that cannot sprint for battle. And still, the submarines will be out there at night, black hulls under black water, waiting for the moment a tanker's silhouette crosses the moonlight. The meeting ends with bows and formal acknowledgements, but no one leaves with relief. In the hallway, a captain mutters to another officer, almost as if he's ashamed to say it. This is not a problem they can solve with courage. This is arithmetic, and the arithmetic is turning against Japan. June 12th, 1943. Kure Naval District, Inland Sea, Japan. The morning air over Kure smells of salt, coal smoke, and paint. On the water, destroyers and training craft cut clean wakes, and for a moment everything looks disciplined, controlled, normal. But inside a briefing room overlooking the harbor, the atmosphere is different. It is the feeling of a door closing. A lieutenant commander adjusts a projector screen and clicks to the next slide. Tonnage charts, sinkings by month, routes most frequently attacked. A list of ships that once carried oil like arteries carry blood. The room is full of senior men, admirals and captains with quiet confidence trained into them for decades. Some sit with hands folded, others hold pencils they do not write with. Everyone watches the same line on the graph, the line that goes down like a cliff. The brief is blunt. American submarines are not just hunting warships, they are hunting everything that feeds warships. They are hunting the food and fuel that keep airfields active, the bauxite that becomes aircraft, the steel that becomes escorts, the rice that keeps soldiers from collapsing in jungle outposts. They are hunting the empire itself. An admiral with a narrow face leans forward and asks what the escort situation is in the southern lanes. The answer is humiliating. There are not enough destroyers, not enough Kaibokan escorts, too few trained sonar men, too few aircraft dedicated to patrol, too many convoys sailing with thin protection because there is no choice. Some sail with a single escort. Sometimes an older vessel with tired engines and a crew that knows the odds but does the job anyway. The admiral's jaw tightens. He has commanded fleets. He has studied decisive battle doctrine since he was a midshipman. But this problem is a slow strangulation. And doctrine does not speak the language of starvation. He says, carefully. That shipping is now the decisive battle. No one laughs. No one even shifts in their chair, because they can all feel how radical the statement is, and how true. In another corner of the room, a staff officer points to a series of markings on the map ambush areas where U.S. submarines have been most active. The pattern is clever and cruel. The Americans are learning. They are coordinating. They are waiting where ships must pass, where geography funnels convoys through predictable channels. The officer's voice lowers when he mentions the newest problem. Submarines are improving their tactics. They are attacking at night on the surface, using the darkness like a cloak, slipping close and firing spreads that hit multiple ships before the escorts even understand what direction to turn. One captain mutters that escorts are dropping depth charges on shadows. Another captain answers that they do not have enough depth charges to waste. But they waste them anyway, because doing nothing feels like surrender. That is when the senior admiral finally says what he has been holding back. He tells them that the situation is not merely serious. It is becoming impossible. He does not use dramatic words. He does not call for sacrifice. He simply states that the flow of materials from the south is failing, that the home islands can build battleships only if the raw materials arrive, that the aircraft factories can run only if fuel and metals arrive, that the fleet can sortie only if the tank farms are full. And then he says something that makes the room go quieter. He says that even if they win a surface battle tomorrow, they will still lose if the convoys are not protected. Outside the window, the harbor looks calm. Warships sit at moorings like sleeping animals, but the calm is a lie. Because the inland sea is not where the war is being decided now. The war is being decided along shipping lanes thousands of miles away, in black water, with no witnesses but the sea. In the days that follow, orders begin to change. Convoys are reorganized. Sailing schedules are adjusted. Escorts are reassigned. A push begins to build more small escorts and to train more anti-submarine specialists. But everything has friction. Steel and engines are limited. Skilled crews are limited. Time is limited. And the American submarines do not pause to allow Japan to catch up. Far south, near the Philippines, a convoy steams in a tight formation. The sea is deceptively calm, a rolling field of blue. On the horizon, clouds pile up like mountains. The merchant ships are fat with cargo, riding low, their decks cluttered with crates and drums and spare parts. They look slow because they are slow. On one of the escorts, a young sonar operator wears headphones that pinch his ears. He stares at a dial as if staring harder will pull a sound out of the water. His captain paces behind him, boots loud on steel deck, trying not to show how badly he needs the sonar to find something. The operator hears nothing but the ocean's own noise, a steady hiss. The convoy's screws churn, the escort's screws churn. The sea is full of echoes, and somewhere in those echoes might be death. Then the first torpedo hits. It is not a loud boom at first. It is a deep punch, a concussion felt through the hull. A geyser of water and oil rises like a black fountain. The merchant ship shudders, and men who have been staring at nothing suddenly move in every direction at once. A second torpedo follows, striking another ship in the column. Now there is fire. Now there are screams. Now the convoy begins to break formation, ships turning hard, some nearly colliding because fear is faster than discipline. On the escort, the captain balks for speed, for turns, for depth charges, for anything. The sonar operator finally hears something, a faint rhythmic pulse, but it is already too late to be sure. Is it a submarine's screws? Or is it a wounded freighter's propeller churning unevenly as it dies? Depth charges splash and detonate, sending columns of foam up into the air. The escort crew cheers each explosion as if noise equals victory. But below, the American submarine has already slipped away into the deep, calm, patient, and alive. Days later, back in Japan, the report lands on an admiral's desk. Another tanker lost, another freighter lost. Cargo that was meant to feed airfields and shipyards now scattered across the sea. The admiral reads the report twice. Then he sets it down and speaks to the officer standing at attention in front of him. He does not shout. He does not rage. He says something colder. He says that their maritime transportation is the foundation of everything, and that foundation is cracking. He says, with the weary clarity of a man watching the tide come in, that they are fighting an enemy who has found Japan's throat, and the enemy's hand is tightening. November 3rd, 1943. Imperial General Headquarters Liaison Office. Tokyo. A cold wind rattles the window frames, and the paper screens tremble as if the building itself is uneasy. Inside, a coal brazier glows weakly, throwing orange light across maps pinned to the walls. The maps are crowded with islands, arrows, airfields, naval bases. The empire looks enormous on paper, but on the table, the empire has been reduced to ration lists and fuel allotments. A naval captain lays out the latest shipping summary. He tries to keep his voice level as he speaks to the assembled officers, but the numbers refuse to stay polite. Convoy losses have accelerated. The American submarines are sinking ship after ship, not just in the open ocean but closer to home, closer to routes the Navy once considered safe. More than ships are being lost. Time is being lost. Confidence is being lost. The ability to plan beyond the next month is being lost. An Army officer, stiff with resentment, asks the Navy why it cannot protect the supply routes. The question is sharp, a blade wrapped in bureaucracy. The Navy officer does not respond with pride. He responds with exhaustion. He says the enemy has too many submarines. He says the escorts are too few. He says their anti-submarine methods are improving too slowly. Then, quietly, he adds the line that makes the room fall into a deeper silence. He says fuel is becoming the limiting factor for everything. Not pilots, not shells, not ships. Fuel, the word hangs there like smoke. Fuel means training. Fuel means patrols. Fuel means destroyers running fast enough to chase contacts. Fuel means carriers putting aircraft in the air. Fuel means ships leaving harbor at all. Without fuel, the Navy becomes a fleet of anchored steel. That afternoon, in another office, a senior admiral meets with his staff. The admiral's uniform is immaculate, but his eyes look tired in a way no tailoring can hide. He gestures to a chart of oil shipments. The lines show deliveries dropping month by month. He speaks in the measured tone of a man trained to keep panic out of his voice. He says the southern resources are useless if they cannot be transported. He says the Americans understand this. He says the enemy is not trying to defeat Japan by sinking warships alone. The enemy is trying to defeat Japan by starving Japan's industry and garrisons. A staff officer mentions that supplies to the outer islands have been cut so sharply that some garrisons are already reducing rations. The admiral's gaze narrows. Rations. The word is more dangerous than any torpedo, because rations mean morale. Rations mean disease. Rations mean soldiers who cannot march, who cannot dig, who cannot shoot straight. Rations mean airmen too weak to fly and mechanics too weak to repair. Rations mean men dying without an enemy bullet. The admiral asks which garrisons are worst affected. The staff officer points to dots on the map, places that used to be spoken of with confidence. Rabaul. Truk. The Gilberts. The Marshalls. Outposts that were supposed to be fortresses are becoming prisons. Far away. At Truk Lagoon, a naval base commander steps onto a pier and looks at the water. The lagoon is beautiful, calm, ringed by green islands and a pale sky. It looks like a postcard, but it smells wrong. It smells like rationed fuel, like engines that are run only when necessary. Ships sit idle, their crews restless. The base has fewer supplies each week. The men eat smaller meals. Some have begun saving biscuits like treasure. At the base fuel depot, a petty officer checks gauges and writes down levels that keep dropping. He knows how much a destroyer burns per day. He knows how much an aircraft consumes on a patrol. He knows the math the admirals are trying to avoid. He sees officers arguing over whether to send a reconnaissance plane today or save the fuel for tomorrow. The very act of looking for the enemy is becoming too expensive. Then, one humid night, a transport limps into the lagoon with its deck scarred and its escort missing. Survivors stand in clusters, some wrapped in blankets, some staring into nothing. An officer steps ashore and hands over a report. Submarine attack. 2 ships sunk. Cargo lost. Ammunition and food intended for the garrison scattered into the sea. The base commander reads the report under a lantern. Its light makes his face look older. He closes his eyes for a moment. And in that moment, he is not thinking about glory. He is thinking about rice. He is thinking about fuel drums. He is thinking about men on distant islands waiting for supplies that will never arrive. Back in Tokyo, the admiral receives another set of messages. some written in careful phrases, others raw with desperation. Commanders at forward bases are requesting more shipments. They are requesting medicine. They are requesting spare parts. They are requesting food. The Admiral reads them all. Then he places them into a stack that is already too high. He turns to his Chief of Staff and gives an order that sounds like mercy, but feels like defeat. He says they must prioritize. The words are simple, but everyone understands what they mean. Some garrisons will be fed. Some will not. Some will get fuel. Some will not. Some will be reinforced. Some will be left to endure. The Chief of Staff asks which ones will be prioritized. The Admiral does not answer immediately, because to answer is to admit that the Empire is shrinking, not in territory yet, but in reach, and reach is power. Meanwhile, the American submarines keep moving. In the darkness south of Formosa, an American boat runs on the surface, diesels thumping softly, crewmen peering through binoculars. The sea is calm, the sky sprinkled with stars. The lookout whispers a contact report, a freighter silhouette, a tanker behind it. The submarine's captain does not think about honor. He thinks about targets. He thinks about tonnage. He thinks about how many barrels of fuel are inside that tanker and what those barrels would mean to Japan's fleet if they arrived. He orders the attack. Torpedoes slide into tubes. Men check settings with practiced hands. The boat turns, angles in, closes the distance like a predator. From the freighter's deck, a Japanese sailor is smoking, grateful for a moment of calm. He sees nothing until the white streak appears, cutting the water toward him. He has time to blink. Then the world becomes fire and water. Later, in Tokyo, another admiral sits alone with a ledger. He runs a finger down a list of sunk ships and realizes the list is starting to look like an obituary for Japan's future. He speaks aloud, not to an audience, but to the cold room. He says that national logistics are collapsing. He says that the lifelines are being severed one by one. And he knows, with the kind of certainty that comes when a storm has already arrived, that the Imperial Navy has no effective answer that can be deployed in time. February 17th, 1944, off the coast of Kyushu, Japanese home waters. The sea is slate gray, flecked with whitecaps. A bitter wind cuts across the deck of a small escort vessel as it punches through swells that slap the bow like open hands. The ship is not glamorous. It is narrow, utilitarian, built for one purpose: to guard the slow, heavy merchantmen that now carry the Empire's survival. On the bridge, the escort commander grips the rail and scans the horizon. His eyes are raw from salt spray. He has been at sea too many days in the last month, chasing contacts that vanish, escorting convoys that arrive missing ships, listening to men whisper that American submarines are everywhere. Below, in the sonar room, headphones clamp against a young operator's skull. He closes his eyes to focus, trying to separate the ocean's constant hiss from the faint hint of machinery. He is listening for a heartbeat that does not belong to the sea. The convoy behind them steams in a staggered line. Tankers and freighters, their holds packed with whatever Japan can still move. Fuel drums, ammunition, food, machine parts. The ships ride low, heavy with cargo that cannot be replaced easily anymore. A merchant captain looks out from his bridge and sees the escort's thin silhouette. One escort, sometimes two. He remembers earlier days when the Navy felt vast and invincible. Now the ocean feels like it belongs to the enemy at night. In Tokyo, the countermeasures have been written into orders and manuals, pressed into the hands of crews who are learning too late. Convoy discipline is stricter. Zigzag patterns are mandated. Escorts are told to maintain speed and position, to avoid clustering too close to the merchants, to be ready to charge at sonar contacts without hesitation. Depth charge patterns are standardized. Lookouts are doubled. Air patrols are requested whenever possible. But everything on paper meets the same reality at sea. The escorts are slow compared to destroyers, and even destroyers are stretched thin. Sonar sets are imperfect. Crews are inexperienced. Air patrols are limited by fuel and by aircraft that are needed elsewhere. And the American submarines, with patient captains and improving equipment, keep finding ways through the net. A staff conference in Yokosuka ends with a senior admiral standing over a chart of the inland sea approaches. He speaks in clipped phrases to his subordinates. The enemy boats are now reaching closer. They are striking nearer to the home islands. They are not afraid of Japan's coastal defenses the way they once were. One officer suggests laying more minefields. Another suggests rerouting convoys through narrow channels under air cover. Another insists on creating dedicated hunter-killer groups, escorts that will hunt submarines instead of just reacting. The admiral listens. Then he says something that cuts through the room. He says they do not have the time or the resources to build the perfect solution. He says they must do what they can with what they have, while the lifeline continues to bleed. In the weeks that follow, the Japanese Navy tries to adapt. Small escorts increase in number. Training intensifies. Air units are ordered to patrol convoy routes. Merchant ships are fitted with whatever defensive guns can be spared. The Navy even tries to coordinate better between ships and aircraft, to force submarines down and keep them down. But the ocean is wide. The convoys are predictable. The needs are constant, and the American submarine force is not a single knife. It is a growing set of blades. On a moonless night in the East China Sea, a U.S. submarine runs on the surface. The diesels throb softly. The bridge watch peers forward into darkness where the sea and sky merge. A faint smudge appears. Not a star, not a cloud. A ship, then another. A convoy. The submarine captain studies the silhouettes through binoculars. He counts escorts. He watches their positions. He sees the gaps, the weak spots. He knows that every tanker here is worth more than a warship in terms of what it will do to Japan's future. He orders the boat down to periscope depth. The submarine slips under, the world changing from wind and darkness to the close metallic breath of the hull. Men move quietly, their faces lit by red lamps. At the periscope, the captain measures the angle. He calculates speed. He waits for the right moment when the escort turns slightly away. When the merchant ships drift into alignment, he whispers the order. Torpedoes fire. They leave the tubes with a shudder that is felt through the boat. Then there is only waiting, the long seconds where everyone listens to the ticking of time itself. When the first torpedo hits, it is like the sea is struck by a hammer. A column of flame rises. The tanker's hull splits, and fuel spills across the surface, catching fire and spreading like a moving nightmare on the escort. The commander sees the flash and feels his stomach drop. He turns hard toward the explosion, ordering full speed and depth charges, his voice sharp with urgency. The sonar operator hears a contact. He calls out a bearing. The escort charges, dropping charges that fall and explode with violent underwater thumps. The crew cheers each detonation. They want to believe the enemy is there, crushed under pressure, broken and dead. But the contact fades. The submarine has already slid away, diving deeper, turning silently, leaving behind the burning tanker and the chaos. The convoy scatters. Merchant ships collide, or nearly collide, in the darkness. Some cut engines, hoping silence will save them. Others race ahead, hoping speed will. None of it changes what has already happened. In a forward base in the Marianas, a Japanese commander receives word that fuel shipments have been delayed again. The delay is not measured in days now. It is measured in weeks, and sometimes in never. He stands in front of his staff and orders aircraft to conserve fuel, limiting training flights, limiting patrols. Pilots look at each other with tight expressions. They know what it means. Less training means weaker pilots. Less patrol means more submarines. Less fuel means the base is becoming blind. Across the empire, the same pattern repeats. Garrisons cut rations. Ships remain at anchor to conserve fuel. Aircraft stay on the ground. The Navy's ability to move, to respond, to concentrate forces, begins to stiffen like a body losing blood. Back in Tokyo, another briefing room fills with smoke and fatigue. An admiral reads a report that lists sinkings like a drumbeat. The words are formal, but the conclusion is plain. The enemy's submarine campaign is succeeding. He looks at his officers and admits something that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. He says the blockade is tightening. He says Japan's lifeline is being cut faster than they can repair it. He says their measures are not enough. And then he adds a final sentence, almost like a confession. He says the Imperial Navy is being forced into a defensive war it was never designed to fight. Outside, the winter wind blows off the sea. In that wind, you can almost hear the Empire creak, the sound of distant islands being starved into silence, and the sound of engines that cannot be fed. October 25th, 1944. Inland sea near Tokuyama anchorage. Japan. The water is calm, almost glassy, as if the sea is pretending nothing is wrong. A massive warship sits heavy at anchor, her hull dark, her superstructure rising like a city of steel. Sailors move quietly along the decks, boots soft on metal. The ship looks powerful. It looks eternal, but the air around her is full of an invisible truth. Fuel is scarce. In a nearby office ashore, a naval administrator runs his finger along a ledger. He checks columns of numbers that used to represent abundance, or at least predictability. Now the columns are thin, allocations are smaller, requests are larger. The gap between them is where an empire begins to die. He has orders from above. Prioritize the fleet for a decisive operation. Allocate enough fuel for one major sortie. Limit training. Limit patrols. Limit everything that is not directly tied to the coming battle. The irony is cruel. The Imperial Navy still dreams in terms of decisive fleet actions, still believes in the moment where steel and courage will settle the war. But decisive moments require fuel, and fuel requires shipping, and shipping is being destroyed. In the same week, a senior admiral meets with his staff. The room is clean, orderly, and very quiet. He speaks in a tone that suggests he has accepted something, even if he hates it. He tells them the convoy losses have become catastrophic. He tells them that oil deliveries from the south are no longer reliable, sometimes no longer possible. He tells them that the fleet is being forced to ration itself like a starving man counting grains of rice. Then he says the line that turns the room cold. He says a battleship without fuel is only an island. The staff officers write it down, though they do not need to. It will stay in their minds. They have watched ships that once sailed proudly now sitting idle, their boilers cold, their crews drilling with wooden replicas and tired routine because real training consumes fuel they cannot spare. Down in the engine spaces of a cruiser, a petty officer checks gauges and valves that will not move today. The air smells of oil, residue, and steel. He listens to the quiet hum of machinery that is not running, and the silence feels wrong. Sailors are meant to hear engines. On the dock, supplies are unloaded slowly. Crates of food, bundles of rope, spare parts. Not enough. Always not enough. The men watch the numbers and do their own mental math, because sailors know logistics as instinct. Some whisper that the Americans are sinking more ships than Japan can replace. Others whisper that the sea lanes are already lost. That whisper spreads because it matches what they see. Forward bases sending desperate messages. Convoys arriving with half their ships missing. Fuel drums counted like coins. Far away, in the Philippines, the Empire is breaking under pressure. The U.S. has come back with overwhelming force, and Japan's defenses depend on moving men and supplies across water that is now haunted. A Japanese convoy commander in Manila Bay studies his sailing orders. He knows the routes are dangerous. He knows the submarines are waiting. But he also knows he must sail, because the troops on Leyte and other islands are hungry for ammunition, for food, for reinforcements. His freighters are loaded. His escorts are thin. The men are tired. At dusk, the convoy moves out. The water outside the bay is black, the sky low with clouds. The ships form up, their navigation lights dimmed, their guns manned. Lookouts strain their eyes until they ache. Hours pass. The ocean seems empty. Then the first explosion comes from ahead. A sudden flash that turns night into a brief daylight. A torpedo has found a freighter. The blast throws cargo into the air. Flames lick up through the superstructure. Men run, some falling, some disappearing in smoke. The ship begins to list, heavy and doomed. Its hold full of supplies that will never reach the front. The escorts sprint toward the blast, dropping depth charges in patterns that feel like prayers. A patrol plane is not there. Fuel is too scarce. Aircraft are needed elsewhere, or they simply cannot be spared. Under the surface, the American submarine turns away, silent, methodical. It does not care about the cries. It cares about the tonnage, the cargo, the effect. A second torpedo hits another ship. Now the convoy is chaos. Merchant captains try to maneuver, but their ships respond sluggishly, heavy and slow. Some turn too sharply and lose formation. Escorts dart between them like angry insects, trying to protect too many targets with too little steel. When dawn comes, the sea is stained with oil. Debris floats, life rafts bob. Survivors cling to planks and pray for rescue. The convoy commander counts ships and realizes the count has changed again. It always changes again. Back in Tokyo, an admiral receives the report. He reads that another convoy has been mauled, another fuel cargo lost, another shipment of food scattered into the sea. He does not slam his fist. He does not raise his voice. Instead, he sits very still, like a man who has been struck and is trying not to show pain. A junior officer stands nearby, waiting for orders. The admiral finally speaks. He says that the submarine war has become a strategic disaster. He says the empire is being strangled. He says that they are now forced to gamble remaining fuel on one great operation, because there will not be enough for a second. And in that admission, you can hear something else, something deeper. He is not just describing a shortage. He is describing the end of freedom of action, the end of movement, the end of choice. Outside, the inland sea remains calm, and the great warships remain beautiful, and the sailors still salute. But beneath all of it is the same reality that American submarines have been carving into the empire since 1943. You cannot fight a modern war if your lifelines are sinking. August 10th, 1945. Tokyo Bay approaches. Japan. The skies hazy, the kind of late summer haze that makes the horizon look bruised. The sea is calm enough to reflect light in broken fragments. But the calm does not feel peaceful. It feels like aftermath. A coastal watch station tracks distant ship silhouettes and aircraft sounds. But it is no longer the same kind of watching. Earlier in the war, watching meant anticipation, warning, the chance to respond. Now it feels like counting the steps of someone you know is already in the house. Inside a naval office in Tokyo, the air is hot and stale. Fans turn lazily. Paper sticks to sweaty fingers. The men in uniform look thinner than they once did. Their voices are quieter, not because they want secrecy, but because there is less strength left for anger. A senior admiral sits at a desk with a worn blotter, reading summaries that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. Merchant shipping losses, fuel stocks, food distribution, the condition of garrisons that can barely be called garrisons now, the operational status of ships that are technically still in the Navy, but cannot leave port. He has spent his life studying fleets and battles. He has believed, as so many of his generation believed, that war at sea would be decided by a clash of capital ships. He has measured strength in barrels, armor belts, caliber, speed. Now he measures it in sacks of rice and barrels of fuel that do not exist. A staff officer enters, bows, and places a new report on the desk. It is another summary of the shipping situation. The Admiral does not need to read it to know what it says. The numbers have been collapsing for months, and the collapse has only one possible direction. He reads anyway, because ritual still matters. The report describes how little shipping remains, how coastal traffic is constantly threatened, how the transport system is fragmented. The Navy has more plans than fuel, more paper than steel, more courage than supplies. He lifts his eyes to the staff officer and asks a question that is almost absurd in its simplicity. How much fuel is available for fleet operations? The answer is a whisper, a number that feels like an insult to every ship in the anchorage. The Admiral nods once. His face does not change, but his silence does. This is what the submarine campaign has done. It has not just sunk ships. It has eroded the ability to think in terms of strategy. It has made the Navy reactive, cornered, reduced to guarding scraps. Across the room, another officer is working through a list of ship movements. Most are coastal, most are short range, most are written with caveats. If fuel is available, if air attack permits, if a submarine is not waiting, outside the capital, in a coastal fishing village, a small wooden boat slips into gray morning water. The fisherman's face is hollow. He once sold his catch freely. Now he hands a portion to officials and keeps what he can for his family. Even civilian life has become a convoy operation. Every resource counted, every movement measured. The Admiral remembers earlier days, when convoys came in heavy and regular, when oil from the south kept the fleet alive, when factories ran with confidence. He remembers when submarines were a nuisance, when destroyers were assigned elsewhere, when anti-submarine warfare was treated as secondary. He does not speak of regret, not openly, but he speaks of consequence. He tells his staff that the national logistics system has been broken. He tells them that the Navy has been forced to defend against a blockade that has become comprehensive. He tells them that without maritime transport, Japan cannot sustain operations, cannot supply distant positions, cannot fuel its fleet, cannot feed its people adequately. In that room, the words are not shouted. They are stated. They sound like an admiral admitting the ocean has been taken away. In another building, another naval officer writes a memorandum for higher authorities. The phrasing is formal, but the meaning is naked. He describes the maritime situation as collapsed. He describes the inability to protect shipping. He describes the result as decisive in determining Japan's capacity to continue war. The memorandum does not praise the enemy. It does not dramatize. It simply acknowledges that U.S. submarines have cut the lifelines, that the empire was built on shipping, and shipping has been destroyed. Far out in the Pacific, on an isolated island airstrip, a Japanese soldier stands beside a rusting aircraft with a torn canopy. He runs a hand along the fuselage. The metal is hot. The plane has not flown in weeks. There is no fuel for training, no fuel for patrol, no fuel for anything except perhaps one last mission that will not change the outcome. He looks toward the sea and thinks about ships that were supposed to bring supplies. They never came. The ocean did not deliver. It consumed. In the final days, even the remaining warships become symbols rather than weapons, anchored or confined, their movements dictated by scarcity and enemy control. The fleet that once sought decisive battle is reduced to waiting, rationing, enduring. In Tokyo, the Admiral sets the report down and leans back slightly, feeling the stiffness in his spine and the heat in the room. For a moment, he closes his eyes. He does not see a carrier deck or a battleship firing broadside. He sees a tanker burning at night. He sees a freighter breaking in two. He sees a map where the blue lines of shipping routes are crossed out in red. He opens his eyes and speaks to the room in a voice that is calm, almost gentle. He says that the war was decided not only by bombs and battles, but by the sinking of the ships that carried oil, food, and raw materials. He says that when those ships began to vanish in large numbers, Japan's fate began to harden into something unavoidable. And in that quiet admission, you can hear what the Admirals had been forced to learn since 1943. An island nation lives or dies by the sea. When the sea lanes are cut, everything else follows.